If you've been on the internet lately, you've probably seen some Fibermaxxing, chugging a glass of psyllium husk in water, prebiotic sodas, people casually announcing that they're going to be eating 45 grams of fiber like it's a personality trait. And I think it raises a really important question. Are we actually supporting our gut, or are we just chasing trends? Today, we're going to be breaking down prebiotics and probiotics, what the heck they actually are, how they tie into our mental health, and why you probably don't need to overhaul your life or buy a $4 soda to support your microbiome. Welcome to Bite of Mind, the podcast where nutrition and mental health meet. We are two registered dietitians breaking down how food actually impacts your mood, your focus, and your overall well being. We like to use evidence based information without all of the noise or confusion. So, my name is Rachel Robinson, and I'm joined by my co host,
Ilkay Washewski.
So, let's get into it. So, Ilkay, what are we diving into today?
Today we're talking about prebiotics and probiotics, what they are and how they support the gut-brain connection that we introduced last episode. So if you're interested, please go back and refer back to it. Definitely listen. It's a fun episode too. And how to approach them in a realistic and more sustainable way. So then we're going to talk about the supplements when they might make sense. And sometimes, instead of having supplements, you can just incorporate foods instead of supplements. We're going to touch base with that as well.
Yes, exactly. Last episode, we talked about short chain fatty acids, so the SCFAs, and how the bacteria in our gut work to ferment the fiber and produce these compounds that influence inflammation, our stress response, immune function, and even our brain signaling.
Yes. And today is really the how. If those compounds matter for mood regulations, how do we actually support the bacteria that make them? So that's what we're going
Yeah,
to investigate today.
exactly. Because when people hear like gut health, I think they often think of like just digestion, right? But in the
Mhm.
context that we're talking about, it's the additional role of like inflammation, the HPA axis, stress hormones, neurotransmitter signaling. So I just want to kind of jump just straight in, really. So,
Mhm.
Ilkai, can you take a second and explain to our audience what the heck is a prebiotic and how does this differ from a probiotic?
Yes. So technically, a prebiotic is a substrate selectively utilized by host microorganisms, and that confers a health benefit.
All right, which let's be real is not a very helpful sentence for our podcast audience.
Exactly. So in normal languages, everybody knows my love for kind of like dumb things down, even to explain to myself. Sometimes I like to use like simplistic explanations. So let's
Yeah.
just get into it. Prebiotics are almost like fertilizers. They are items that your gut bacteria use to then produce byproducts for our good health, pretty much. And short chain fatty acids are kind of one of them as well, which
Mm.
we've investigated again in our last episode. Again, don't forget to go back and refer to it.
Yes. So how does this like prebiotic that's like a fertilizer differ from a
Mhm.
probiotic?
Probiotics are the live microorganisms themselves. So they are actually living beings in a way.
Okay. So probiotics are the living organisms that live inside our gut, and then prebiotics are basically like their food.
Exactly.
Okay. So now that we've kind of differentiated what it's a prebiotic, what's a probiotic, I want to dive into some more detail. So, where does fiber come into play here? Because we hear all the time about how fiber is good for our gut health. And we also talked a lot about fiber in our last episode. So, I kind of want to ask you this question because it's first on my mind. Is fiber a prebiotic?
Okay. Yes and no. While most of the prebiotics are type of fiber, not all of the fiber is a prebiotic. So that's kind of where the, I guess, difference comes in.
Okay, interesting. Can you explain more on that?
Yes. So fiber is a non-digestible carbohydrate that pretty much found in a lot of plant-based foods, and almost all of them in some way. We can't fully break it down, but our gut bacteria can ferment some types of it. So, but not all of it. And also be classified as prebiotic, the fiber must pass through the GI tract undigested and stimulate the growth and or the activity of certain good bacteria in the large intestines. So it's pretty much it needs to make a certain impact on our population of the gut microbiome.
Okay. Which, like, not all fiber does then. So only some fiber does that.
Correct. So there are two main categories of fiber, how they differ and how they interact with water. Based on that, we have two different types, as I said. One of them is soluble fiber, the other one is insoluble fiber. Just like
Okay.
its name, soluble fiber dissolves in water, forms a gel like substance in the gut, which helps slow digestions, improve nutrient absorption, and regulate your blood sugar. I'm sure that if you've ever been with a dietitian, you've heard about that in one of your sessions. And bind to dietary cholesterol to reduce its absorption. So it's like it works like magic. Insoluble fiber, on the other hand, doesn't dissolve in water, but it adds bulk to stool and helps move things more quickly through the digestive tract. So, this is what we use when we have constipation.
So soluble fiber is kind of more of the important fiber here, though, then because it's more fermentable. So, like, meaning the
Mhm.
bacteria uses that to produce those short chain fatty acids that we talked about.
Exactly. But also, not all of the soluble fibers are fermentable. We need to remember that too. And all
Okay.
soluble fibers are found in foods like, we can find them in fruits and vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, sweet potato, and avocado, figs, and apples, to name a few. Um,
Okay.
Again, they can be soluble, but there are some properties that might not be really fermentable as well. Oats, oatmeals, and whole grains are some of the other grain ones that you can find soluble fibers. Beans and legumes, or lentils, they are pretty much
Mhm.
soluble fibers too. And seeds and nuts like chia, I'm sure that a lot of people are familiar with it. That gooey consistency that comes
Yeah.
from them being soluble and
Like the
dissolving in
ch-
water.
yeah, like the
Yes,
chia puddings that you see all over social media. Those are so good, though. I'm not gonna lie.
yes, they're so delicious. Flax also do the same impact, and also sunflower seeds have some soluble fiber properties.
Yeah, so I think it is important, though we're talking about mainly a lot of like soluble and specifically like fermentable fibers today, that I do want to take
Mhm.
a sec to know insoluble fiber as well, because it's also very important for our GI health. Like, even
Yes,
though
it is.
it's less fermentable than soluble fiber, it still supports our gut health because it helps maintain regular digestion, gut integrity, helps us stay regular in the
Mhm.
bathroom. But
Yes.
insoluble fiber is found in things like the skins and seeds of fruits and vegetables, popcorn, leafy greens, nuts, and dried fruit. I do think
Mhm.
it's really cool to note, though, that as we just went through kind of the list of food items, that there is some overlap with a lot of these, right? Like fruits and
Yes.
veggies and nuts specifically are listed kind of in both of these as being sources of both soluble and insoluble fiber. And I think that just
Yeah.
goes like it falls in line with everything we've talked about in the past. Like, life is gray, right? Like, nothing's really truly black and white. And fiber lives in this gray area too. Like, all types of fiber are found in multiple different sources or even in the same.
Yes. I don't think we like to recognize that with a lot of things. This is again my personal opinion. Just wanna slip in there a little bit. So I don't think we realize that, but yes, that is exactly what you're saying is correct because you have this like soluble and insoluble fibers list, and you would see a lot of the same products, like oatmeal, for example, has insoluble properties too that are helping you in a certain way as well. So it's important to not to
Mhm.
dismiss that as well. I think, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that you touch base with that.
Yeah.
So, now I want to talk about what's happening online too. I've sent you a couple of
Okay.
videos as well. We've looked at them too. We're seeing this like
Yeah.
Fibermaxxing trend, which
Oh, yeah.
I was kind of surprised to find out where people suddenly try to hit 40 grams overnight.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I've seen this kind of all over, and it's so funny to me because it's like, why do we always have to jump to like the extremes for everything? Like, it's such, I think, like a human nature. We find out something's good and
Mhm.
then we're like, "Oh, let's now just go for as much of this in our diet as we possibly can get." But it's like that can backfire on us. Like, fiber is beneficial, but adding too much of it too quickly can cause some pretty uncomfortable side effects.
Yes. Like bloating, gas, overall stomach discomfort. We can see all of them because most of the time, this was one of the things too. I even want to give an example. Sometimes I would hear from my patients, like, but I feel bloated, but you're eating too much fiber. That
Yeah.
happens, especially when
Mhm.
you have IBS, people with IBS, which I'm sure a lot of us do because I come across a lot of people with IBS
Mhm.
diagnosis lately. They're extra sensitive to certain fibers like inulin or fructooligosaccharides, which are both fermentable and soluble fibers. since they're fermentable,
Mm,
this does classify them as prebiotics. However, it's this fermentation that can make it uncomfortable for individuals who already have GI conditions. So when you hear or see something like this, remember that nutrition is individual. It doesn't.
mhm.
There's no one recipe works for all people. So when you have um, IBS, fibermaxing can actually work against you instead of working for you.
Oh, 100%. I'm so glad that you brought that up. Like, that's such a good point to mention because nutrition is really individualized. And I think a lot of these trends online, we see like people going, oh, it's good. Now everybody needs to eat this one specific
Mhm.
way. And it's like that may not be beneficial for every individual person because of so many different reasons, right? But I like that you brought up inulin because inulin is added to a lot of products that are marketed for GI benefits. One thing that comes to mind is like those prebiotic sodas, like Poppy,
Mhm.
that brand. Because
Yes.
somebody with, say, like IBS could reach for a product like that thinking, oh, it says it's going to help my GI health. But then they wonder why they're suddenly experiencing a lot of GI like upset or discomfort. And
Yeah.
also, I did want to mention, I think Poppy just got sued recently for this, actually. It was a class action settlement, I believe, over allegations about the gut healthy like marketing claims
Mhm.
because they weren't supported by scientific evidence. It was something around like that their sodas only contain 2 grams of inulin, and the amount seen in research to be beneficial was something closer to like 8 to 12 grams. I think if I remember right, the range. And they were kind of complaining that because the inulin was so low in the sodas, it didn't quite reach the threshold for being clinically beneficial enough to be able to market that it's gut healthy. So I
Mhm.
just thought that was kind of interesting to like mention as well.
I was very surprised to see that too when you first shared that with me because I had no idea they were sued for that, to be quite honest. I love America for this. You can sue anybody. So it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I am just gonna say this, but okay, I'm on the kind of public side for this because day to day, you and I both are interacting with the patients. And if you don't have a good nutrition education, which majority of us don't, these kind of health claims kind of like make them confused, because a lot of
Mm,
people just want
yeah.
to do whatever they read online and they hear something, somebody saying something, or they see a claim on a product. They're like, oh, this must be really good for me. I've seen it in somewhere else
Mhm.
too. Fiber is really beneficial for you. Maybe just this is what I should do. And
Mhm.
I think, I'm not saying this is companies' responsibilities, but I think a proper nutrition education could definitely, prevent people going down to those kind of rabbit holes where they incorporate millions of different functional products along with some like supplements throughout the day. And we
Yeah.
both know that sometimes they can do harm to you, but yeah, it was very surprising to see that they also were kinda like promoting something that is even classified as low fiber group or moderate fiber group when we give education. If you remember it, we like to be like, "Yeah, it should be 4 or more grams of fiber in order for them to be like, oh, this is a high fiber product per serving," right? So
Yeah, exactly. Well, and like kind of on the same or kind of maybe on the opposite side, like I do get why the lawsuit happened because on like one hand, you are marketing for these benefits that don't happen at the level that's
mhm,
in the soda. But also like
yeah,
you don't know what other people like what else people are eating in the day, and maybe they
mhm,
want to use the soda as a way to help them get to that level of prebiotics needed to even see the benefits. And if they are, like, by all means enjoy your soda. But I think the important thing to mention is kind of like you were saying is it's you don't have to be consuming products like this in order
mhm,
to get the GI benefits of like say inulin or other prebiotics. And it can also be kind of an expensive way, like let's be real too.
yes,
Not everyone has the means to be spending so much on stuff like that. But inulin specifically in food sources is found naturally in things like onions, asparagus, chicory root, and then Jerusalem artichokes as well. So I mean, there are food ways that we can get in that inulin throughout the day without having to spend, $4 on a prebiotic soda.
yes. Chop some onions to your foods and you're good. Um, that's a dietitian's recommendation. But in a more serious manner, I can say nuance matters because
Hmm.
we're not saying that these products aren't necessarily bad for you. It's just they're not necessary for most of the people. So,
Oh,
as long
definitely.
as you get proper fiber from your food, If you want to incorporate this, just like you say, by all means, it's great. Continue to do it. And that's exactly the way I am with my patients. And I know you're that way too. All of us dietitians are that way. We're trying to
Hmm.
respect our patients' wishes. But are they really necessary as dietitians? Do we, tell you, yes, you 100% have to have these products in order to get enough fiber throughout the day? Absolutely not. There are lots of good food sources that you can incorporate.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree. While we're on the topic of prebiotics, though, and we have kind of mentioned inulin, I kind of want to take the second to mention what are the other kind of main two prebiotics that we see.
Fructans like oligofructose and fructooligosaccharides and galacto-oligosaccharides. I'm sorry for pronouncing
Butchering.
these with a little bit of a weird, yeah, butchering the words, but no judgment. If you understand it, it's good for you. Like,
Yeah,
don't expect
I'm not
anything
shaming.
more. Yes.
I'm not shaming you. They're big
So,
words, man. Like with
I know, I know.
fructooligosaccharides. Like
And they're
with
Latin, not even in
fructooligos.
English.
I know for sure. And with like fructooligosaccharides, like we can just say FOS for short. And then
Yes.
galactooligosaccharides, let's just say GOS.
Yes, they are now FOS and GOS. That's how we're gonna refer it. But Rachel, you actually found a really nice research on this. Would you like to share that with us?
I do. I do. So I found this systematic review and meta analysis that was done in 2022 by Dow and his colleagues, or their colleagues, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, as usual, we will put the research links in the description below. It won't just be this one. We have a bunch of different research that we've read for this episode. So if you're interested in reading or checking any of those out, they will be in the description down below.
And can I say, we appreciate Rachel's hard work for putting all of these things over there. We appreciate you, Rachel. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
well, thanks.
Seriously.
So, in this study, they reviewed 8 randomized controlled trials, which involved
Mhm.
FOS supplementation in humans, which I do think is important to note because it does mean it's a little bit more applicable to us when we're talking about this supplementation, because it's not a preclinical trial where that's usually done with animals. And as we know, animals are not humans, so things can be different. These
Yeah.
randomized controlled trials were done with humans. The other thing I like to mention too is that systematic reviews are helpful because they can take data from multiple studies. So instead of just looking at one study that may have had a really low participation, like number of n of participants,
Mhm.
we can take the information from multiple studies and then kind of aggregate it or like put it all together and then look at what the results say. So that's where these can be kind of helpful. However, this systematic review did only look at 8 randomized control trials. So it's still not a ton, but it's better than a small study. So in total, they had a total of 213 participants that had been supplemented with FOS. And then they had 175 control participants across the 8 randomized control trials that they looked at. The FOS doses that the participants received ranged from 2.5 to 15 grams per day. And then the duration of supplementation, like how long those participants took the FOS for, ranged from 1 week to 56 days.
So, what did they find in the end? Did they find any benefits on like, bacteria numbers growing or any benefits of short chain fatty acid amounts?
Yeah, so they found that the FOS supplementation did reliably increase a specific strain of bacteria. So, Bifidobacterium is the name of that strain. If you remember from part 1 of our series, we did talk about this strain, actually, in particular, about how it's one of the ones responsible for producing those short chain fatty acids. Though the study didn't specifically measure any of the functional changes like short chain fatty acids or how many of those were put off by the bacteria, we do know that the supplementation did help increase that specific bacteria strain.
What about the dosage of FOS?
Yeah, so dosage is actually an important question there. So they did
Yeah,
find that higher doses, so things between doses between 7.5 to 15 grams per day, which is a lot, not gonna lie. And then for people that
it
consume that for
is.
longer, yeah, and then people that consume that for longer than 4 weeks did tend to have stronger effects. So the kind of higher doses, longer term supplementation had more of the bifidobacterium than those who had lower doses and less length of time of taking it. Despite its fermentable nature as well, the FOS did not seem to significantly increase the gastrointestinal discomfort in these people. Doesn't mean that people didn't have any GI problems or experience anything, but it just wasn't a noticeably statistically significant amount across the board in participants in order to say that, like, yes, this
Hmm.
causes these issues. I do want to point out some considerations and limitations with this study, though. So the first off was that it was a systematic review and meta-analysis, but it only contained 8 of the randomized controlled trials, which is a small sample
Hmm.
size. It doesn't really allow for a lot of variability in study design. So it that makes it a little bit harder to interpret the information. And also, even with the 8 randomized controlled trials, we still only had about 200 people that received the supplementation, which
Hmm.
is better than, say, a sample size of like 10, but it's still not like where we would want to see it, where it's like, several hundred
Very
thousand
significant.
could
Yeah.
be, yeah, people. Like I mentioned before, the functional changes like the metabolites, like short chain fatty acids, weren't specifically measured or assessed either in these
Oh.
studies. So even though they found that like the FOS supplementation did increase a couple strains of bacteria, or specifically really just the bifidobacterium, we don't know if that had an impact on the short chain fatty acids. I like to think that it probably did because we know other research shows that those
Hmm.
bacteria do produce those, but there could be so many other variables that weren't measured, like how much other fiber were they consuming, what did their other diets look like, that type of stuff. And then being that it only really kind of focused on like a couple strains, it would be nice to have future studies that incorporated a broader sequencing and metabolic profiling for the bacteria, just so we can better understand the FOS's impact on them.
Yeah. So like I want to kind of like reflected what I'm understanding from this study to you, but at the same time, before we
Mhm,
get in, I really want to say how important it is to understand how science works, right? Like you can
mhm,
do multiple different studies, still you don't have this like concrete evidence at the end of the day,
mhm,
enough to actually be able to use this or use this in application in the healthcare. So that's very important to
mhm,
note. But overall, what I'm understanding from from this study, and thank you so much for sharing that with me too.
mhm.
Uh, they saw that FOS consumption, mainly in the 7.5 to 15 gram per day range, had some beneficial effect on increasing bacteria known to produce, which it was bifidobacterium, I think,
Yep.
produce the CFA, so short chain fatty acids, which we know from other research that can support our mood in a way and maybe reduce the depression.
Exactly. So things like reducing the pro-inflammatory cytokines, lowering that HPA axis activity,
Hmm.
and then maintaining all the integrity of those linings, like the gut lining and the blood-brain barrier lining. And we talked about before that this doesn't mean that consuming more fiber or consuming a fiber supplement like a prebiotic would cure
Hmm.
depression or cure a mood problem. Nutrition just supports our system. It doesn't
Yeah.
replace things like therapy, medication, sleep, stress management, or even just social connection. It's just another tool in our toolbox of mental health management. But kind of enough of the super sciencey rabbit trail, though. I did want to go back to the Fibermaxxing because you sent me this video the other day, and I'm gonna put it on the screen for those of you who are watching. But for our listeners, I want to describe what the video is. So on this video, we see a woman. She's talking about how she likes to fiber max. She gets all of her fiber in for the day. The one way that she likes to do this is she takes a large glass of psyllium husk and mixes it with water with a little bit of lemon. And this cup is like full, like I'm talking 8 to 10 ounces of water. And then she just chugs it. And I
Yeah.
saw that the first time and I was like, I really, really, really don't want to yuck someone's yum. If this works for her, that is phenomenal. But just the texture of that for me, I was gagging just watching that. And I have a hard time believing that that had to have tasted good. Maybe that's what the lemon was for, though.
Well, lemon for one, lemon can make anything taste better. We know that. You need a little bit of lemon. But okay, here's the thing. I just want to say it. You know how they think dietitians eat cardboard and blah 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 blah? No. We don't eat stuff like this, we do not. I can assure you that I do not drink psyllium husk every single morning to get my fiber. I'm just trying to make sure because I'm a healthy individual and I don't think I need psyllium husk
Yeah.
to, move some things in my bowels. But you are, in the name of diet, if you are drinking things that are yucky and not delicious, don't do it. Don't do this to yourself. There are healthier,
Yeah.
there are more tasty ways to eat healthier. All I'm going to
Mhm.
say.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, like, the lemon probably masks the flavor and probably helps, but yeah, that texture just gets me. But again, if that works for her, great. But when we look at like
Mhm.
psyllium husk, I think it's important to mention too that psyllium husk is a soluble fiber. It holds on
Yes.
to water, but it's not one that dissolves very well either. So it really does leave like chunks when you mix it
Mhm.
with water. It's not like it doesn't just nicely dissolve. I also think
Mhm.
it's important to mention too that psyllium husk isn't actually fermentable either, so it's not a prebiotic.
Yes, so but it is a great laxative. We
Yeah,
use it in the
that's true.
hospital, with our patients sometimes. It
Yeah.
softens and bulks the stool for sure. So if you're experiencing something like that and your healthcare provider is okay with it, definitely something that you can incorporate, but not in a context of like a with an everyday use for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. So, I mean, like, again, if that is works for her and helps her keep her bowels regular, then by all means, awesome and great. The one problem I just see when we put a lot of stuff like this on the internet is that a lot of other people will see this and be like, "Oh my god, I have to do that too as a way to like get fiber in," or that's maybe the only way that I can get enough fiber in daily. And I just want to preach that there are so many more pleasant ways that we can get adequate fiber intake in. We don't need to be chugging a glass full of psyllium husk in the morning to get it. Again, if that works for you, great, but it's not the only way. And I
Mhm.
think with that, I kind of want to segue in. Now, time to talk about, and maybe Ilkai can do this for us. How do we support our microbiome without just overhauling our entire lives?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things, starting with like simple swaps in your life, it's very important. For example, if you are a juice drinker, you can just switch that with some fruits. You'll be getting both soluble and insoluble fiber with that, and that is in a way more pleasant than
Mm,
adding additional untasty fiber product into your diet. If you're again,
yeah.
if you are someone who drinks juice. But the other things can be adding things to your diet. Like, so let's
Mm,
think about some of the versatile fiber containing foods that we can add to our diet.
mhm.
One of the ones that I personally use is beans. I really, really
Yeah, I
like
love
them
beans.
incorporating to my salads, incorporating
Mhm,
to your casseroles, they go good, incorporating to your soups, they go good. You can make dip out of them. So they're very, as I said, very versatile. You can even mix them with your grains, like it still is
mhm.
going to taste good. So you don't have to sit and just eat can of beans by
Yeah.
themselves, but like
Well,
having
and
them
like,
available and adding them to your food can be a way.
let's be real. I love beans so much that I could just eat a can of refried beans by itself.
I know.
Like,
I know.
I love
I think a lot of
beans.
people can, because you see it refried beans are actually pretty delicious, so
Yeah, they
I'm
are.
gonna keep them out of this conversation. They're pretty good, yes.
Say with the beans too, it's also I love that you mentioned that you can make, like, dips and stuff out of them because they blend so well for, like, into things, and I've seen
Yes.
people, like, blend them into hummuses, and well, I mean, obviously, hummus is a chickpea, really, but, like, have
Yeah.
added other beans as well into that, or to make, like, bean dips instead of just
Uh-huh.
using a can of refried beans, mixing, like, multiple different beans. Beans are a great source of protein too, so, like, if you're vegan or vegetarian, like, beans are phenomenal to add into your
Mhm.
diet just for the added protein benefits of them as well. They're just ugh, I love beans.
Absolutely. I'm 100% on your side. I try to make sure, like, and when I say versatile, by the way, I mean it in really versatile. Keep a couple cans available at home. You never know where you can like incorporate beans in. And
Mhm.
sometimes nutrition is about that, to being creative. Like you're preparing a meal for yourself and just think about it. Do you think that beans could go good with that? If it does, go for it. Don't be hesitant and don't stay in the box when it comes to nutrition. You can definitely think
Yeah.
outside of the box and add
Well, and I
different
think it
kind of foods instead of drinking whatever drinks.
well, and then, like, I think a great thing too is even looking at other cultures, like, how they incorporate some of these foods into their diet, like,
Mhm.
I say cultures, but I'm gonna bring up the UK. I mean, they eat beans on toast, you
Yes.
know?
Well, UK
So,
is a culture too. This is a low context culture. We learned out in school, but it still is a good culture. Yes, absolutely. They incorporate into their breakfasts. In Turkey,
mhm,
we mix them with our rice. And I know that there's like Spanish rices like that too. You incorporate, you see like different cultures across the world trying beans in a different way. So we got really hyped about beans. So
yeah.
we love them. Apparently, we're not lying about it. We love them. Beans are good, guys. Definitely try
They
them.
are. Well, other than beans, if especially if you don't like them, what are some other ways we can get fiber in?
I think, since we were talking about chia seeds and flax seeds, those are actually pretty good sources of fiber too. You can get like significant amount, but any kinds of seeds really, or nuts as well. You can get some fiber from them too. Um,
Mhm,
I think one of the ways you can add them to your smoothies for sure. With nuts, there are again lots of things that you can do as well. I love them. I personally love them in salads. Sometimes they
mhm.
again go good with soups. You would be
That's
surprised.
true. Or
Or
desserts.
when you do your stir fry, I tried it the other day with some, like, pea
Mm,
excellent, excellent. And as you say, desserts. Yes, ma'am,
mhm.
definitely. I love having, nuts in my dessert for sure.
Mm,
Okay, yeah, you can definitely add to your smoothies or your oatmeal too, instead of having just oatmeal mixed with water. Because some of my patients are like that. They just mix their oatmeal with brown sugar and some water, and that's it. They call it a day, but there is a room for other things in that oatmeal. You can add, like, some, fruits with it. You can add some seeds like chia seeds or flax seeds too. The one side note with, flax seeds, make sure that they're ground so that you can get the full benefits from them.
oh, yeah, for
And
sure.
also one last thing, I mean, pretty much, frozen vegetables or canned vegetables, throw them into your, different meals. Again, whether it's casseroles, if you're baking some chicken, throw some vegetables in there, cook them together.
I love that you bring up, like, frozen vegetables specifically too, because I think a lot of times we think that, "Oh, in order to have enough fiber, I have to have fresh fruit or I have to have fresh vegetables," and you don't have to, and fresh fruits and vegetables can be expensive at times too,
Mhm.
especially if you're trying to get things in the off season when they're not really growing, like it's winter or and you're trying to get some berries, or it's summer and
Yeah.
you want squash. But being able to, like, utilize frozen vegetables, it's a cost efficient way to be able to add it in. It's more versatile. They don't go bad as quickly, so you can keep them in
Mhm.
the freezer. And in fact, a lot of frozen vegetables can actually be more nutritious than fresh things because they're picked at peak ripeness and then frozen right away. So they have
Hmm.
all of the nutrients and everything versus like the fresh produce. Not saying that fresh produce is bad by any means, it's still healthy, but is
Yeah.
often picked slightly before full ripeness so that it can ripen on the way to the grocery store. So the fruits and vegetables that you're getting frozen have been on the vine or on the tree or on the bush for longer, so they can be actually just as healthy, if not sometimes more than the ones that we're getting in the fresh aisle.
I'm so glad that you mentioned this right now because sometimes, many people have this excuse of like, but I can't find I can't buy vegetables because they go bad before I cook because I'm always busy. This is actually, what you're telling us is actually very attractive for people who's not able to buy vegetables for this very reason. And trust me, a lot of people have this excuse to not to buy so much vegetable because it's a momentary decision, right? When we're doing grocery shopping, when
Mhm,
you know that you're not going to have time for the next week to cook and then prep some of the fresh vegetables, then you're not going to buy them. You're less likely to buy them.
mhm,
And I think it goes back to how we talked about SMART goals and how we talked about
mhm.
like how to keep our motivation up a couple episodes ago. I think it pretty much goes back to that, making it more convenient for yourself
Oh,
so
yeah.
that that thing can happen and can have a place in your life.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like, even when it comes to meal prepping, if you're a type of individual that likes to meal prep, frozen vegetables are
Mhm.
awesome because back in the day, if I didn't have time to like make sure I prepped something for the whole week or had time to cook like a elaborate thing, I would just take some frozen turkey meatballs that could be
Mhm.
heated up in the microwave, threw it in a container with some frozen broccoli, and then just made some rice to toss in there. And there we go. I had an easy
Yes.
lunch that I took to work that I just threw in the microwave and heated it all up. I didn't have to
Yep.
spend, 2 hours on a Sunday cooking. So,
Mhm.
frozen vegetables just are a really great way of utilizing convenience in a way that, like, works for us.
As a side note, how we talked about, incorporating fiber is important, but let's just be sure that we are gradually introducing fiber because it can be too
Mm,
much for our digestive system to handle it, all at once. If we just
yeah.
increase from one night to the next day, everything, we're throwing a coup, we're
Mm,
changing everything, it's the new
that is
management.
true, yeah.
So if we do that, then we can actually shock our digestive system in a way. So let's just be careful and try to increase it gradually. But aiming roughly 25 to 35 grams is per day is usually the ideal.
That's the thing that we talk about all the time too, is like you want to gradually add. We don't want to worry about restricting anything. We don't need to completely overhaul everything.
Mhm.
We can make small, sustainable changes that add up over time. It's all about that consistency. But now that we've kind of talked about ways that we could add fiber into our diet, let's kind of shift gears and kind of come back to what we mentioned at the beginning and talk a little
Mhm.
bit on probiotics. So can you kind
Mhm.
of refresh our brains here on like what a probiotic is?
Yeah, as we've mentioned previously, probiotics are the live microorganisms, and they are the bacterias themselves. Although people often think of some bacteria and other microorganisms as harmful germs, we know them. Many are actually helpful to us, so we kind of coexist, cohabitate, yeah, with them.
Mm, mhm.
Bacteria, they can help digest our food and destroy the disease-causing cells or produce vitamin.
So, like we kind of talked about in our last episode, the microbes that make up our microbiome are fairly stable once they're established throughout our
Mhm.
life, but they can be impacted by things like antibiotic use, our environment, and also our diet.
Yeah. Like we just saw with certain fiber intake, we can also consume the probiotics themselves directly in our food. Fermented
Mm,
things like yogurt, kefir, kombucha, which is very, very popular lately. You can find
mhm.
a lot in the grocery
Love
stores.
kombucha.
Kimchi, yes, I love it too. Kimchi and miso, these things
Yeah.
are fermented products, and we actually eat those bacteria when we have those products.
And for those Northern Europeans and Germans out there, sauerkraut is also
Yes,
a great fermented item.
we love
But yeah, on
sauerkraut.
oh, I love sauerkraut. My husband hates it, but that is one thing I bond with my mother-in-law on. We are both sauerkraut lovers.
Awesome.
Some of our audience may also be asking though, like, what about supplements? Because I know when we go into the grocery store that we can often see like probiotic supplements on the shelves or in the refrigerator section.
Mhm.
So I kind of want to, yeah, switch talking about talking about like probiotic supplements.
Definitely. Because this is also something that I come across to a lot too. My patients always ask me for some like options. What can I have as a probiotic? Even the 2012 National Health Survey interview showed that about 4 million US adults had used probiotics and prebiotics in the past 30 days. I think this is a good data to start with because it is very, very popular among adults in the United States, among everybody in the United States, pretty much. Even
Mm,
the parents are kind of like, encouraging their kids to add some more probiotics. Among adults, probiotics were the third most commonly used dietary supplements other than vitamins and minerals. So I think it's
wow.
pretty significant when you think about it.
Yeah.
And the use of probiotics alone by adults quadrupled between 2007 and 2012. The 2012 NHIS also showed that 300,000 children aged 4 to 17, which is 0.5%, had used probiotics and prebiotics in the 30 days before the survey. So it's
Yeah.
significantly prevalent among
Well,
people in the United States.
yeah, well, and that's crazy too because even looking at that, that was what, 14, almost 14 years ago. I'd be so
Mhm.
curious to know like if they've put out any like more recent stats on that because I would bet that that's probably even higher now, which is insane because like this is a lot of people already. And then to
Mhm.
like think that how much more this kind of wellness industry has grown in the last decade, like how much
Mhm.
more probiotics are probably utilized today. But I think the question when we look at this though is even though there may be a lot of people taking probiotics, do we actually need to be taking probiotics? Or I guess maybe like what could be some of the reasons people may reach for a probiotic?
Okay, so I feel like we will, in the end, kind of decide if we should actually be taking probiotics that much or not after we give all the, information. We can kind of investigate it, but
Yeah.
most of the time, probiotics are at a high level. They can help with your body in three main ways. One of the ones is they can help maintain healthy community of microorganisms or help your microbiome to return to a healthier state, kind of like your doctor prescribing you after the antibiotic use. So,
Okay.
because I'm sure that a lot of people are familiar with it because it's becoming more and more prevalent in the medical
Mhm.
community.
I see it a lot more,
Um,
yeah.
and second one, could be certain probiotic strains can produce substances that have beneficial effects. Like, for example, some strains produce short chain fatty acids, like we've already seen in the previous
Mhm.
when we were discussing about this previously. And third, they can influence the immune system. They can interact with immune cells in the gut and can help regulate inflammatory responses.
Okay. So those are some of the reasons that people might reach for an antibiotic as
Hmm.
well, because those are some of the benefits that they can provide. I do think
Hmm.
at this point it's kind of important to slow down and add some more nuance here, I think too.
Hmm.
Because something that most people don't realize when it comes to probiotics is that they're regulated very differently depending on how they're marketed.
Exactly. So in the United States, probiotics can be sold as a dietary supplement, which those are the ones that we see out in the shelves, when we go to
Mm,
Walmart, Walgreens, or as a food ingredient, which we've already mentioned about them, like kimchi could be one of them. Kombucha is promoted as probiotic. Kefir is another one promoted that way, or Activia,
mhm.
or a drug, which is those are the ones that physicians are prescribing after antibiotic use.
So, like most probiotic capsules that you see as at the store are sold as those dietary supplements.
Yeah.
And this is where it becomes key. Dietary supplements do not require FDA approval before being
Mm-mm.
marketed or on the shelves. So they are
Yes.
controlled completely differently than like medications.
And they're allowed to make structure and function claims like supports your digestive health, but they're not allowed to claim that they treat or prevent diseases unless they've gone through the much stricter drug approval processes.
Yeah, which that is like such a huge difference and a big
Mhm.
difference to point out. Like if a probiotic was to be marketed as like treating depression or treating ulcerative colitis, then it would need like very rigorous clinical trials and FDA
Mhm.
approval. But most supplements, I would say almost pretty much all of them have not gone through that level of testing.
Mhm.
And that is important to call out. It doesn't mean that probiotics never work or they shouldn't be used, but it's important to mention that because they're not regulated in the same way that a medication is, where it has to prove its efficacy, prove that it's safe, and prove that it works, that there could be possible dangers taking
Mhm.
a supplement that has not had to prove that it's safe or effective that's just on the shelf. And on the worst or on the best outcome is that it just didn't work at all, it didn't do anything. But on the
Mhm.
potential worst outcome is that it could actually cause harm.
I just want to, give people a little bit of like imagination. This is how I try to tell people too when we talk about like probiotics and what are their benefits. And of course, I mostly recommend the food sources rather than certain strains of bacteria. But imagine, your bacteria are the residents of your body, and then you kind of work for each other. You help each other in certain ways, right? And then when you introduce a certain strains of bacteria, then automatically they're going to fight for each other's place. So it's kinda like that to almost like playing with the danger when you introduce just one strain. So, yes, probiotic supplementation can be very dangerous too, so it's important to watch out when you're, supplementing
Mhm. Yeah.
probiotics.
Well, because I think when we go back to our first episode, right, like our microbiome is made up of millions of microbes, and
Mhm,
our GI tract has between 3 to 5,000 different species or strains of like bacteria. And so when you look at a probiotic is legitimately the live bacteria. And when we're
mhm.
introducing them to our body, we could potentially be throwing off our like current diversity and current like structure that they currently have.
Absolutely.
However, I also want to mention too that like some of the probiotics that we buy in the stores, with the way that they're in the capsules or the way that they're kind of assembled, some of those don't even actually make it past our stomach acid and are destroyed in our stomach before they even reach our digestive system. And so in
Mhm,
some of those cases, depending on certain supplements, that it might not even be doing anything, and we might just be spending money on something that's not really going to actually have any effect. And I
Yeah.
know like probiotics can be shiny to some people where they see like, oh, like we've talked about emergent studies showing like
Mhm.
bifidobacteria or lactobacillus could improve depressive symptoms. So maybe if I supplement with these, like my depression will go away or like my depression will get so much better. But like, yes, there may be emergent studies that show like these strains can be beneficial for these things, but like we mentioned before too, like food and stuff is not like a cure. Like nutrition's not a cure for things. We can help manage things, but
Mhm.
taking a probiotic is not going to replace like a medication if like a medication is what you need to help manage your mental health symptoms. It
Yeah.
also doesn't mean that we should just be willy-nilly taking random specific
Mhm.
strains because like we've been mentioning, it could just throw off our current bacteria in our gut. And having a thrown off bacteria, system, it could be uncomfortable with GI symptoms. So,
Yeah, not even that, it brings your immune system down too, so watch
yeah.
out. It's very
Mhm.
important.
Well, and it
Um
increases your risk of even developing like actual issues with
Mhm.
overgrowth of other types of bacteria strains because a lot of, like you were saying, a lot of them compete with each other. So if you're introducing one that maybe is ultra competitive, it might start
Mhm.
replacing some of these other ones and grow to be so much in your digestive system, you start having like symptoms and issues of that.
Yeah, and there hasn't been really any research on probiotic supplementation that provides us with conclusive information on depression. Like which strains are most effective or like, what dose is ideal and how long someone should take them or who's most likely to benefit from
Mm,
them. So there could be like some accommodating conditions as well that you're experiencing too, just to keep in mind that's what it came to my mind for a second. And even in
mhm,
depression research, we're not at the point to make a blanket recommendations for our patients.
mm,
I personally do not do any recommendations of certain strains of bacteria. I like to read the researches and hoping that one day we'll get to that point if we'll be the master of even the living microorganisms that we can freely take them. But yeah,
yeah.
so just like you say, in these kind of things, even nutrition, our science, our job is mostly preventative too. It is preventative care. We need to talk about what the ideal nutrition looks like. What does the healthy nutrition looks like before everything occurs?
Well, and I don't want this to either come across either as like we're telling you don't ever take a probiotic
Mhm,
whatsoever. Like there can be specific situations, especially if you're working with your provider, where a probiotic may be beneficial and may be necessary, or
mhm,
you may have some benefit from a probiotic. There's just no specific like recommendations or research that supports like a blanket recommendation for specific supplementation in all of these cases or in every person that has depression supplementing with this specific
mhm.
bacteria would be beneficial. Like we don't have any of those blanket recommendations. And both I know Ilkai will agree with me is like we both like to take a food first approach as well because
Mhm.
if we can support like our microbiome and our health with our diet and our nutrition, like what we're intaking on a day-to-day basis, it's going to help us support having a very healthy microbiome continually over time.
Yes.
And that's kind of more beneficial, like instead of having to constantly rely on a drug or a medication to help us with our gut bacteria, in some cases that might be necessary, but for the
Mhm.
average person, like just supporting it with our diet is going to be most beneficial. But kind of speaking of
And more
which,
sustainable.
oh yes, exactly, more sustainable. But kind of speaking with probiotics, kind of going back to the safety side of things, probiotics are generally safe for healthy individuals, but they're not inherently risk-free, and that's because of them being dietary supplements, right? So there have
Mhm.
been some cases, though albeit very rare, of infection being caused by probiotic supplementation in people who have immunocompromised immune systems.
Mhm.
There's also been a lot more cases of people just experiencing GI symptoms from
Mhm.
probiotic supplementation as well.
Which just reinforces that trendy is not the same as evidence-based, like, which that's what
Yeah,
we've been saying.
that's true.
I wanna rant for a second, I think we need to have a section where the, dietitians rant. Seriously, because if you make the craziest claim on social media, people take you serious. Not even social media, anywhere, on TV, anywhere that you can reach out to people, any kind of media access outlet that you can reach out to people. You make the craziest comment or craziest claim about health, then people are like, "Oh, this must be true because this is so
Yeah.
extreme," you know? But
Yeah. Yeah.
moderation. this is what we're going to be focusing on: moderation and balancing things out, and food
Yeah.
first approach, of course, per usual.
Well, and I think like the extremes are so flashy, right? Because if I'm making an extreme change, then I feel like I'm making a big change in my life. But it's like it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be extreme to like actually have an impact either. So,
Yes.
but yeah, but this is why we emphasize a food first approach, because when you eat fermented foods, you're not just getting one of those bacteria strains in isolation, you're actually getting a really broad diversity, and
Mm-hmm.
diversity consistently correlates like throughout the research with better health outcomes. We want that diversity in our microbiome. So diversity is the way to go.
That's why it may matter more for long term gut health than mega dosing a single strain in a capsule form, than, like, diversifying your food is more important than that.
So if we zoom out here, probiotics show some promise for some GI and inflammatory conditions. There is some situations in which a probiotic supplementation could be beneficial, but usually the supplements that have more of a broader strains and not like one specific strain. Probiotics can support mood in specific, or could potentially support mood in specific contexts, but they're not a magic
Mhm.
pill, and they are not all
Yeah.
created equal, and we have to be just keep in mind about safety of them. So Ilkai, I think that is a lot for today. Don't you think?
I 100% agree, but I feel like our listeners would love it if you just kind of put everything together and summarize it for us one more time so we can have our takeaways.
Yeah, let's bring it together. So, if our audience remembers nothing else from today, I do want them to remember these 5 things. One, we can feed our microbes by trying to include our recommended 25 to 35 grams of fiber daily. But if you are not used to eating fiber, highly recommend slowly increasing the amount of fiber that you eat in a day. Don't just jump willy-nilly into like the deep end with the 35 grams right away. Two, we can support diversity in our microbiome with a food first approach, with not only prebiotics like fiber, but probiotics with fermented foods. Number three, reduce disruptions in our life to also support our mental health. So we can reduce things like chronic stress in our life, seek out maybe other types of management tools that may be beneficial for us. And yes, this all does also include avoiding those unnecessary restrictive food rules that would add unneeded stress. So just throwing that out there again. Four, be
Awesome.
patient with yourself. Dietary changes don't just happen overnight. They can take time to adjust to and find your rhythm, and small changes over time add up to making big
Embrace small
differences.
changes.
Yes. And then the last thing, but not the least, variety is the spice of life. Mental health is systems based. So no single nutrient is going to cure any mental health problem. Nutrition and a balanced diet should be used in conjunction with other treatments to best support our management. So, yeah, thank you all for listening today. We post every other Wednesday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We appreciate any likes, follows, comments, shares that you do on any of the platforms. They all help
Give us
us.
some
If
feedback.
you are Yes, we love to read any feedback. So if you have any ideas for future episodes too that you want us to cover, feel free to leave them in the comments below. But with that, I'm going to leave us on our dietitian kind of statement of wisdom, I guess, for this episode.
Yes,
Ilkai, do you
dietitian's
want
word of
to?
wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, do you want to tell us what the word of wisdom or statement of wisdom is for today?
Well, today we thought, since we've made so much emphasis on some of the small changes and some of the small actions, we thought we can say nutrition doesn't have to look impressive to be effective. It's often those small and intentional actions repeated often that gives us the changes that we're looking for. So you don't need to climb a mountain in one day. You don't need to change your life drastically in a day. Small changes matter too. Let's embrace them.
Yes, thank you. Awesome. Well, we'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.